What is going on, baseball fans? Welcome to episode 12 of This Week in Baseball, presented by Diamond Digest. We're down to our last two episodes. We got this one and one more with the World Series afterwards. Typical crew on today with myself and Callie returning. Callie happened to sleep through the last episode, sleeping off some tough losses for both the A's and Arkansas last week.
Hey, we won this week.
So
let's not talk college football.
So apparently it's a rough week for Jonah, who's also joining us along with Ethan Fisher. Some regular faces here on the crew, which is always nice to see. But this week, plenty of talk about, obviously, the ALCS. And at the time of this recording, the NLCS is still going on. If you're watching the YouTube version, you can see it in the background. I will be periodically turning my head to update everybody on the call here and hopefully can inform some of our conversation too at times. But a lot of the ALCS, NLCS talk, looking forward to the World Series as well as some of the bigger storylines this week. But let's jump right into it. Touching base with the rest of the league, not much to touch base about. You know most of it. In terms of the ALCS, the Rays were leading 3-0 in the series. The Astros were trying to do the improbable, came back and tied the series at 3. However, Charlie Morton really set the tone for Tampa Bay in Game 7 yesterday, or 2 days ago at the time of this recording. And the Rays will be going to their second World Series, their first since 2008, hoping to be one of the final 6 teams who has not won the World Series, hoping to kind of end that for themselves. And on the NLCS side, the Braves had a similar large lead. They were up 3-1 in the series over the Dodgers. Dodgers tied it at 3, and we are now in the bottom of the 5th. It is 3-2 Atlanta in Game 7, and certainly a bullpen game that we have seen many times throughout the postseason. The Rays still anxiously awaiting their opponent, who by the time you listen to this, you'll know the opponent. However, we will be placing our live bets, I'm sure, as we get the information here. But like we said, it is 3-2 in the 5th as current time of recording. There were no debuts this week in the sad end to our weekly debut series for the year. It appears it carried into the postseason, which was phenomenal and certainly gave a lot of fun conversation. What has been a wacky year for baseball. No COVID updates either. However, I think it's a very good thing because as they've kind of opened the bubble and now not only families are allowed into both the NLCS in Texas as well as the World Series in Texas, there are a considerable number of fans in attendance as well. Texas obviously having different COVID restrictions and COVID rules than some other states, and Major League Baseball certainly taking advantage of that. It is weird to see people in the stands once again. But thankfully, no COVID updates in terms of the players or anything we know about the fans as well. So another good week for Major League Baseball in that respect. Certainly seeing another sport like the NFL currently still having its issues and some very similar to baseballs. But again, very positive news. Some very negative news on the same side of things. The 6th Hall of Famer in baseball passed away in 2020, just this week. Joe Morgan, who played second base for the Astros, Reds, Giants, Phillies, and A's, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1990, passed away this week. This one might be more personal to a larger number of fans than some of the passings from recent weeks. If you watched ESPN growing up, Sunday Night Baseball, John Miller and Joe Morgan were familiar names and familiar faces, even for a 9-10-year-old kid like myself at the time. And if you played like MLB 2K games, their voices were always prominent parts of that. Certainly a little bit of our childhood passed away with Joe Morgan this week, and certainly something that is difficult on many fan bases, and certainly the little kid in all of us. So we certainly wish Joe Morgan's family the best in what is certainly a difficult time for all of them. But we will move into our main segment now, the 7th inning stretch. Like I said, pretty short touching base. You get to hear less of me talk and more of our fine panelists this evening, analysts, whatever I want to call you guys. Jonah, I believe this is your first time doing 7th inning stretch.
Yes.
My apologies, because Callie is a seasoned veteran and has taken everybody down every time she has been on without faltering. So certainly, Callie, the pressure does remain on you, though, as you had a week off and hopefully didn't tarnish your game too.
I'll summon my inner Randy.
There you go. Some of your inner Randy Arozarena and pull off whatever upset we might want to call it here. I got live betting odds on Callie, no doubt here. But you know the rules. You got about a minute to make your case for each of the 7 questions I ask. Best argument wins a point. The points are completely arbitrary. If you can make me laugh, if you say something real funny, you'll probably end up getting the point, even if you don't necessarily deserve it. But hey, until someone tells me what the rules should be for this, I'm going to change them every week. That being said, let's get into our first question here. Good luck to everybody. This week, the White Sox fired manager Ricky Renteria, and if I can speak from a White Sox fan perspective, was a pretty shocking move. Certainly not something I had expected. A lot of the fan base not expecting, though many calls for his firing came throughout the year. 2 names connected to that job are AJ Hinch and Alex Cora, 2 that were part of the Astros cheating scandal back from 2017. So given the the openings in Detroit, Chicago, and Boston for managerial positions this offseason, both Hinch and Cora are likely to get jobs based on the availability of managers and the positions available. Certainly it seems as if Cora will be going back to Boston, and AJ Hinch, along with Tony La Russa, which let's not mention that name being connected to the White Sox, but AJ Hinch has been connected to them. The question here is, should these guys get managerial positions so soon after? You can say, yes, they've served their time, whatever. No, they shouldn't. Here's why. That's really the main part of this here. And Jonah, since you are the first timer here, I will start with you. Your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's all been but confirmed that Cora is going back to Boston, which is actually, I'm fine with Cora and Hinch getting jobs. I just don't think Cora should be allowed to go back to Boston, because you're not sure how much the atmosphere has changed there, how much the culture has changed there, and he was a big part of that culture. I think that a manager going into a different clubhouse that has already a different culture and seeing the punishments, there will be a lot more strict on them, and it will be a different experience for them. So I have no problem with them going back for that reason. Do I still have issues with the punishment? Yes, but I think that the punishment shouldn't be on just kicking them out of the league for good.
Callie?
I don't see why they shouldn't get jobs to do sign stealing on the scale that the Astros and Red Sox and Yankees reportedly did. It takes more than just a manager to be in on it. It's a whole organizational thing that can't be implemented by just one person. If anything, punishing the managers were the wrong targets in the Astros punishment. I don't see why they shouldn't get a new jobs.
I think that's fair. Ethan?
Yeah, for the most part, I agree that I'm fine with them getting jobs, but I think it's a little different for the 2 of them. AJ Hinch was more vocal about not approving of what the Astros were doing, and Cora, on the other hand, was involved both in Houston and in Boston. So I think I'm a little more lenient towards Hinch, but I'm pretty okay with both of them. And I actually made a note here about thinking that the Tony La Russa rumors were pretty far-fetched. So I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all to see AJ Hinch in Chicago.
I'm quite worried about those rumors, but one that might be interesting to watch too, and I'm gonna give the point to Jonah here, because you made a good point about the clubhouse cultures. How much has it changed in Boston? Reneke was very clearly a move that kind of set them up to just put Cora right back in that position a year later. So I think that's a very good point. One name that might become available too, and maybe just if anyone has any quick thoughts about the potential of this, is if the Dodgers don't end up winning this evening, and certainly no guarantee considering they're down 3-2 now heading into the 6th inning, does Dave Roberts have a job in LA next year in 2021?
I don't think he should.
Interesting.
He
Why?
doesn't put the Dodgers in a position to succeed. He leaves starters in too long. He puts pitchers who aren't great at getting swings and misses. He puts pitchers who are more contact-type pitchers in situations where a ground ball can blow the game wide open for the other team. He doesn't manage the bullpen well. He doesn't manage the starters well. He's not a good game manager. He should not be leading a team trying to compete for the World Series.
So you're saying even if he becomes available, teams you wouldn't expect, or I guess would you expect him to be a front runner for either? Let's just assume Cora is going back to Boston for either Detroit or Chicago, or do you see this as something
because Detroit I can see because they're not going to be needing big game management in a while. They're rebuilding, so I can see him going there because his weaknesses aren't going to be a big deal there.
Interesting.
I don't see Roberts leaving, especially if they win today. I don't think that he's going to be available. Personally.
Interesting. I have received very mixed thoughts from people about that, so that's why I was curious. I have a hard time faulting him for them not winning a World Series because it is not easy to do. But Callie, to your point, if the argument can be made, and certainly there's the potential that it could be,
like he put in the series so far, he's put Gratterall in situations with runners in scoring position, which is not the kind of place he's going to thrive.
Sure,
Gratterall, despite his throwing, despite having great stuff, doesn't get swing and misses or get much strikeouts. Instead, he should have put in someone like Jake McGee, who has a 40% strikeout rate, something like that. He cannot manage a bullpen well.
Interesting. I think the Dodgers and Dave Roberts are actually a very divisive topic in this sense because you'll have people who are very pro Roberts and pro the decisions he makes, and then Cal, you bring up good points about situations you're putting people in. I guess my question to you, just out of curiosity, Dodgers start Dustin May this evening. Right move, wrong move? What would you have done in that situation? What should they have done in that situation?
I think Dustin May should have appeared in the game, but I don't think he should have started. I think he should have started Urias or Gonzalez.
Interesting. All right. Just curious. Nothing. No right or wrong answer on that one. I'm wrestling with it myself as someone who is a fan of a team who is looking for manager and wondering who's actually going to be available. I think I would not foresee Roberts being available, but I wouldn't be all that surprised if he was either, because I think you can make the argument either way, and certainly it just depends on how the Dodgers front office, Andrew Friedman, all them see the decisions made. Is it something along the lines of what Callie's saying, where you're not putting the guys in the best position to succeed, or is it more so you can't go out there and throw the pitches for them at the end of the day? Like if they're not producing, they're not producing. So it does come down to what you're saying, though, Callie. Does everyone feel that the Dodgers and Dave Roberts are putting them in the best position to win? And I think that's best left up to the Dodgers front office.
We'll find that out in like an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say we will find out sooner than later.
The Dodgers are currently losing, but I don't really fault Roberts for that. I don't think all the Dodgers' losses this series can be put on him, but there are some that can.
That's fair. I think there's always going to be those moments you can point to where if you look back and it's like, that would have been fine if it worked, but if it doesn't, hindsight always tends to bite managers in the butt, unfortunately. But let's get into question 2. That's actually something we're going to, seriously, I think we'll be monitoring over the next couple of weeks is the managerial situation in a lot of places. But question 2, the Houston Astros have been quite the story this season. They finished under 500 in the regular season, and because of this year's postseason rules, they were in the postseason, made it all the way to the ALCS, and almost came back from that 3-0 deficit they had in the ALCS. Certainly a very good series. So my question is, what do you make of this season? Were they simply lucky, or has their talent as a whole been overshadowed by the controversy surrounding the team. Ethan, what you got?
I think, if anything, they were actually unlucky during this season. They got hit by injuries pretty hard. Justin Verlander, Yordan Alvarez, Roberto Osuna all missed most of the season with injuries. That's their ace, their closer, and the middle of the order hitter. Between the three of them, they combined to play 7 games. So I think it's impressive that the Astros even made it to the playoffs at all. I think they were really distracted by the whole sign stealing controversy during this season, but that they were like really heavily motivated once they made it to the playoffs and they felt more comfortable. They'd been there before. And I think that once they finally got to the playoffs, that really gave them an extra push. So I think, I don't think it was like an issue of them being lucky at all.
Callie?
When you look at the players who played for the Astros this year, just on the pitching side, I think 11 players alone had never pitched in the majors prior to this season.
Yeah.
That's over 40% of your pitching staff. And once they got to the postseason, a lot of the players they leaned on were those young players. Framber Valdez, he pitched in the majors before, but he wasn't an experienced vet. He was one of the best pitchers in baseball this year, though. Blake Taylor, Noli Paredes, however you pronounce his name, Christian Javier, they were all very good for the Astros. I think that you got to give the Astros a lot of respect for, especially those young players who showed up in a tough situation and went out and performed very well.
Jonah?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention the injuries, but also, like, once we hit the playoffs specifically, I don't think it's surprising to anyone that this team could have gone far and even had a chance at the World Series. Their offense is talented, and, like, even with the cheating scandal, I know overshadows all of it. Like, that's what they became known for, was hitting all the home runs in the postseason and going out with a bang. And then it was literally, if their pitching can string together a few games, like, I don't think anyone doubted that they could fight for the World Series. And, like, I think a lot of people did not trust the Rays, so they were like, oh, it's going to be Yankees, Astros, and the CS again.
Mm-hmm.
So in the season, I think it was injuries, and but they also just did not play well. But I don't think anyone doubted that they could challenge for the pennant once they got to the playoffs.
The thing that always, pissed me off most about the Astros sign stealing, and before we go too far, Ethan, I'm going to give you the point for having the guts to publicly say that the Astros were unlucky, despite whether or not it's true. The potential backlash behind that is certainly interesting. But the point being, what always pissed me off the most was these are talented ball players. Correa, Bregman, even Altuve. You look at these guys who are highly touted guys, not so much Altuve, but Correa, Bregman. This team was very much the same as the one in 20. These are good ball players. And it's almost like you didn't need to cheat to be this good. And that's what always pissed me off about it. The farther we get from it, the more it's kind of that outlook for me is this never needed to happen. You could have won without cheating. You could have. And that's what always frustrated me the most. And that's why I think a lot of fans might be overlooking just the talent they have as a team, which clearly none of you have really overlooked. And just because of anger or frustration towards them. These are good ball players that didn't need to cheat to win. And I think that's still the most frustrating thing for me, looking back at it.
I don't think that, Bregman and Correa being highly revered players is surefire proof that they didn't need to cheat to win. I mean, we've seen very heavily lauded prospects be called up and then fail to perform. The biggest one off of my head I can think of is Jason Hayward.
Sure, but they had success before then too.
But wasn't Bregman's rookie year 2017?
I was going to say
16.
Yeah, I was going to say he had at least 1 year before that, I thought.
Okay.
I think it was a year before that.
This is a good momentary pause for Baseball Reference because I don't know the answer to it. 2016 was his rookie. He didn't play too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I get where you're coming from, though, Callie. That you know maybe the success wasn't
But-
guaranteed just because they're
but-
highly touted prospects.
Let's not looking at the playoffs. Though, what if they didn't cheat? Each one would have had like one less award each season, which would have still been a really good season. Like,
Yeah,
Like-
it's interesting to me to try and think about it that way because I don't know. I see it as these were going to be really good ball players either way.
I agree with you.
Certainly, Callie, to your point, the cheating did help them play as better ball players than probably what their true talent level is. But again, going back to your point, Jonah, too, that you made, once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. Just get there. I think this team had enough talent to where if you got in the playoffs, conceivably, they could have found a way to win it all without any sign stealing scandal. But certainly, I get what you're saying there, though, Callie. That the success wasn't necessarily guaranteed because they were highly touted players.
To go back to the NLCS Game 7, Enrique Hernandez just homered off of Taylor to make it 3-3.
I just saw that on my screen. You're ahead of me.
Dave
We had
Roberts
ourselves
just
a ball game.
Yeah. Well, we had
Well,
ourselves a
that
ball
goes-
game before. It was only a one-run game.
We got
That
ourselves a
goes
new
to
ball
any.
game.
That goes to there goes any predictions I was going to make for this game.
We are back at square one, which is fun. But let's keep it going so we can watch the end of this. No matter the result of today's game, we have now seen 2 Game 7s forced after large ALCS and NLCS deficits. As I mentioned before, the Rays led 3-0. Astros forced a Game 7. Braves were up 3-1. Dodgers forced a Game 7. What do you attribute this to? Is it to see these teams battle back from 3-1 and 3-0 deficits is certainly not the norm. Is it luck? Is it just the nature of a 7-game series? Is there anything you guys attribute this to? We'll start with Callie.
It's obviously a result of no off days. Prior to this, you were able to rely on your top 4 starters, and your bullpen would regularly be pretty fresh. Not only were you able to rely on your best bullpen arms a little bit more, you were also able to use your 5th starter in relief. But now you can't do that because all hands have to be ready to go, ready to start, ready to throw multiple innings. And I think you saw that with the Rays. They started to lose when their bullpen started to see more and more work. And I don't think you can make as much of a direct correlation for the Dodgers Braves series, but I think that's another reason why.
Ethan?
I don't think there's a huge similarity between the two outside of like what Callie said about the no off days in this format. But I think like when I just talked about the Astros, they created like a victim mentality for themselves, which like helps motivate them once they got to the playoffs. So once they were down 3-0 in the ALCS, that was like the point where they were most highly motivated and they started playing their best ball and they came back and tied it. And in this series, I just think the Braves are better than we thought they were, and they are able to hang around with the Dodgers. And the Dodgers got off to a tough start against the best pitchers the Braves have, and they dug themselves in a hole real quick. And then once they got to face like Kyle Wright and pitchers who aren't as good, they brought themselves back.
Jonah?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what I was going to say was already said. I think
It's the rough part of being third sometimes.
Yeah. I definitely think the no off days did contribute, and I think we'll see a difference in the World Series because I believe that they're going to have normal off days.
Mhm.
But I also think, in addition to like the use of the pen, I think it's also just most of the starting pitchers in these series were so young. Outside of, I think it's just Buehler, Kershaw, Snell, Glasnow, Morden, and Greinke were the only set. Did McCullers start a game, or was he only in relief?
I think
McCullers
McCullers started Game 7.
McCullers, so 7 out of what, like 15, 16 of the starters at, only 7 had started in playoff games before. So I think when you're relying on the back end with guys that have never done it, and then also most of these bullpens were all rookies, as Callie said. I think that a lot of it was just the inexperience on the pitching side. Even though a lot of the games were lower scoring, especially, well, not really in the NLCS, but in the ALCS, there were a couple. So I think it's just that a lot of the pitchers did not have experience, which gave more ground for a comeback.
Yeah.
There was also a lot of notable underperformance. Buehler underperformed in game 1. Snell struggled. I think that's notable, something to look at.
Yeah.
Point's going to go to Callie here because I do really think it is a lot to do with the off days. I think, even when you listen to some of the things some of these broadcasters are saying, like John Smoltz talking about the starters not going as long as usual, I'm like, well, it's all hands on deck. It's not like you're going to see you can't throw out your fifth starter in these games and expect to win these games. And you have to be willing to mix and match. And with that comes fatigue, especially we see with some of the Rays, you're not as sharp every night. You're just not as a human being. So I do think off days has a ton to attribute to it.
If
See
there
the
was an
Kings just start an out of the park baseball game and do a 7-game series with off days versus no off days, and you'll really see how different it is.
Yeah.
I also think if there was an off day between game 6 and 7 in the NLCS, that Kershaw would definitely be pitching in game 7.
I mean, he's still probably gonna make.
I mean, it looked like he was starting to warm up, but like they're trying to avoid using him today.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. I'm off days. I really think have created a different atmosphere for these playoffs.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I wonder if like a team gets up like 3-0 or 3-1 in the World Series, will we see the same kind of fight because of the off days?
Yeah, it's a good point. Question 4. We are tied at 1 through the first 3. By advancing to the World Series, the Rays will have another shot at winning their first World Series. Which of the 5 other teams that haven't won at all, the Brewers, the Padres, Mariners, Rangers, and Rockies, do you feel has the best chance of making it to the World Series next? Obviously, the easy answer here being most likely the Padres, since the other 4 are either rebuilding or don't know how to build around Christian Yelich. However,
or Nolan Arenado.
That's a good point. However,
I mean, they don't know how to build pitching around Nolan Arenado. They have the offense around Nolan Arenado.
But at the whole time, keeping in mind that obviously the Dodgers play in the NL West and does not make it easy for the Padres. But Callie, I assume you're going to tell me all about how it's going to be the Padres, given the hat you're wearing right now. So I'm going to let you go first.
Well, instead, I think I'm going to tell you why I think it's none of the other 4 teams. Jeff Bridich is simply the worst general manager in baseball. The Rockies also have arguably the worst player development in baseball. And they are simply, in my opinion, the worst run organization in baseball, even worse than the Mets. And I do not say that lightly.
Oh, God.
The Mariners, they have plenty of young talent, but their young talent is so young, I don't think that they're in position to be competing right away, especially in a tough AL West with the Astros and the A's. The Brewers are also in a very similar position to the Rockies. They have the talent. They have Christian Yelich, obviously. They have Keston Hiura. They have Brandon Woodruff. They have Bruce Sutter. But I don't think they have the ability to put the finishing touches on that team. They have the foundation, but they can't spruce it up with some nice potted plants and some nice lounge furniture. And that's 3. What was the 4th team?
The Mariners and the Rangers.
The Rangers.
Right.
Take what I said about the Mariners, but remove the young talent. Like, I think the only promising young talent for the Rangers currently in the majors is Nick Solak, and he's not there yet.
Ethan?
Yeah, I still think it's the Padres. They are head and shoulders above the rest of those teams. And even being in the same division as the Dodgers, the Padres have the talent to be a playoff team consistently for a while. And so long as they're getting into the playoffs consistently, they have a shot at getting to the World Series at least. But if I had to pick one of the other 4 teams, as much as I don't want to, I would probably pick the Brewers. Like they have Yelich, Hira, Brandon Woodruff, and some Devin Williams, Josh Hader. They do have some nice pieces. And despite there being 4 playoff teams in the NL Central this year, a lot of them limped their way to the playoffs and then just got smacked. So the divisional competition isn't too great. So if I had to pick one of the other teams, I'd pick the Brewers, but I definitely think it's the Padres.
And Jonah.
I mean, no, I'm not going to answer sarcastically about how the Brewers got scammed because Lewis Brinson's finally hitting, but it is. I believe it actually is the Brewers. I just think that anytime you have a year in, year out MVP candidate, along with they have a couple other bats. I think their issue right now is their offense. But if they can add a couple of free agent bats, do development, their pitching development is coming along really nicely. And they have the best 1-2 punch in the bullpen in baseball with Williams and Hader. I would compare the Brewers to the Braves. I think they're probably a year out, a year behind the Braves, but with Yelich, they've made the playoffs like each of the past 2 years. So as long as you're consistently getting to the playoffs, I don't think the Padres, even with their talent, I don't think that will have a clear path to the playoffs every single year. Whereas the Brewers, I think they have a clear path to the playoffs almost every single year now, especially with how close they are.
That's a good point.
If only the Brewers had a talented left-handed hitting outfielder.
Named Lewis Brinson?
No, his name was Trent Grisham.
No.
Yeah, that's going to look like a real rough trade
Zach
at the end of the day.
Davies was in that trade too.
That's
And
going to
he
look
was,
like a real
very
rough
good,
trade.
too.
Yeah.
Points going to go to Callie simply for just tearing into the other 4 teams. That was comical. But I think you make 2 good points, and I think, Jonah, on your side with the Brewers, even some of the things you were saying too, certainly a team that has a decent shot of finding their way at least into the playoffs, and then from there, anything can happen. Question number 5. I'm pretty passionate about this one. I'm going to try not to talk, but it's not going to happen. Fact or fiction? The brand of baseball the Tampa Bay Rays play is bad for the sport. And this is obviously referring to an article that had circulated, was it at least 1 or 2 days ago? I think it was maybe Friday, concerning the way the Rays play baseball. And the gist of the article being, not having any big name stars, not having starters that go multiple innings, not having players that fans can attach themselves to, ultimately is not good for the sport long term. Even more so than the importance of winning. It was made. The point was made such that yes, winning is important. However, if you can't attach names that people can gravitate towards, and the argument was the Rays couldn't, that is bad for the long-term outlook at the sport. So you've all probably read that article, Fact or Fiction. And we will start with Ethan.
Yeah, I hadn't actually read the article until you wrote this question, and then I went over and wrote the article, and it made me mad.
Yeah.
Especially as a fan of the Pirates, who are another small market team. Reading that article, it sounded like they want the Rays to try to follow the lead of some other teams and try to go out and be a big spending team, which just isn't what they do. And they're doing just fine operating how they operate. I think it's really good for the sport to have a team who can consistently succeed like the Rays do without throwing out tons of money. And the Rays, I went through their roster construction, the way that they have constructed their roster specifically through trades is unbelievable. And I have a list here: Mike Zunino, G-Man Choi, Yandy Diaz, Joey Wendell, Willie Adames, Randy Arozarena, Austin Meadows, Manny Margot, Hunter Renfroe, Tyler Glasnow, Ryan Yarbrough, Nick Anderson. That's not even a full list of guys who are playing the major leagues for the Rays. All of those were acquired through trades. which is just insane to me. So I think it's obnoxious to say that the Rays are bad for baseball.
Jonah.
Yeah, it's obviously fiction. I love the way they play the game. I think it's good to have. I like small ball personally. I know like a lot of people don't necessarily like it, but also I like that you have a small market team. But I will make this point. The only reason we're in this situation and an article can be written like this is because of how MLB does their marketing and how MLB is basically making it so that the Rays are bad for baseball, because MLB only focuses on, like, all their social media is home runs, really nice strikeouts. It's the big market teams. They'll highlight like 3 times the amount of the small market teams, which I get technically, but like, the reason we're in this position where like people are saying the Rays are bad for baseball with them not hitting home runs, where they're not having their starters go on, is literally because of what MLB is doing. So I think, yes, it's fiction, but it's also MLB's fault that we're in this situation.
And Callie.
Let me ask y'all a question. What is your
boy.
opinion on Ken Griffey Jr. and Felix Hernandez?
Love them.
Yeah.
That's what you were asking.
They're legends.
Great. Yeah.
Because I can definitely see where that article is coming from.
Okay.
Being a fan of another small market team in the A's, the sword of Damocles is hanging above you every time you watch them, knowing that these players are going to leave in a few years. The last time the A's gave out a big-time contract was to Eric Chavez all the way back in 2006. So I can definitely understand where it's coming from, because it's hard to get invested into it's hard to invest in the players themselves when you know they're most likely going to be gone. Whereas, say the Mariners, they didn't win, but those players had that connection to the fans. The King's Court was always packed, no matter how bad the Mariners were doing. And, you know, I think I can definitely see where that article is coming from. It's player investment compared to team investment, and I think player investment is something that small market teams lack, and it makes me sad that they lack that. I want to be able to get invested into a player like Mariners fans were able to get invested into Felix Hernandez.
Interesting. I can't give out a point now. I've kind of been stumped on this one, because my frustration is that it almost made it sound like what the Rays are doing and the innovative way in which they work is bad. And that's why I think it was last week when we had talked with Diego and Joey last week on the podcast. And I knew if the Rays go to the playoffs, one of two things is going to happen. Everyone's going to love it or everyone's going to hate it. Or excuse me, the World Series, everyone's going to love it or hate it. And the reason being because it's a great story, or people don't like how the Rays did it and got here. I completely understand where Callie's coming now, and being able to attach names is incredibly important. And I think that if the Rays were doing it and not winning, I don't think I would have such qualms with what the article was getting at. I think my biggest frustration is that they want to prioritize putting the big names out there or keeping names around long term over winning, or placing that at a higher I can't get behind that personally. And some of the language that was used in the article made it clear that the names were at least as important as winning, and I don't personally agree with that. I won't be able to. However, Callie, I maybe just because I don't have that same the background, despite how much the White Sox act like a small market team, it's interesting. I don't know. Everyone's going to get a point there because Callie kind of softened my tune on it. I was planning on going like a rant on this question. And
I want to go a little bit more in depth on when player turnover is as constant as it is for a small market team like the A's and the Rays. You're more so cheering for the jersey and the organization than the individual. And by no means am I saying that the Rays organization is not deserving of praise aside from their owner. What they have done with such constraints is incredible. But they're not on the field. They're not the ones you pay tickets to see.
I think that's fair. And I'm kind of mad at you, Callie, for making such a coherent argument.
I've been kicking that idea around ever since John Boyce made his brilliant Mariners series, but I didn't want to jump on the bandwagon of making Mariners content.
I will continue to wrestle with this one because I think if that's the argument that is being made, and Callie, haven't read the article, I assume that's how you interpreted it, then it's not. Maybe it just needs to come from a different person, because the person who wrote it is a Cubs fan, and I'm gonna have a hard time getting behind that argument.
Cubs, that's another interesting one, because Ernie Banks, he never won a World Series, and he's one of the most beloved players in baseball history.
But the Cubs are such a different team in that sense, though. People are going to go to the Cubs no matter what. The Cubs are just a tourist attraction, even of some sorts. I think
that is true.
I think it would have come better from someone from Callie, from your point of view, where here's how this is how I understand it as a fan of a small market team. Maybe that's what it is for me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I actually do really agree with Callie's points, and they're good points. But I also think that saying that the Rays are bad for baseball, I think the small market teams is how baseball improves as a game. So I think it would cut down a lot of the innovation, saying that it's bad for them. But I definitely understand it from a marketing and player development and keeping players around and not and having people actually grow attached, and why that is bad for the game. But I think that but the whole concept that winning with analytics and through small trades and stuff that no one's realizing, I think that's how baseball improves as a game. And that's my bigger issue with the article.
I mean, the reason I get so invested into J.D. Mendelkin is because he's a reliever. He's not going to have a very high price tag come free agency time. There's a chance he does stick around.
Yeah.
Compared to the Matt Chapmans and Matt Olsons.
It's a good point. I think for me, I'm going to sit here as a fan of a team who does not make the playoffs all that often and say winning above all else. I don't care if I can't attach myself to a name ever again.
Oh, I mean, that's how it's felt as watching the Marlins this year.
But at the same time, it's we're all historic. Besides Callie, we're all fans of teams that historically have at least 1 to 2 guys that you can say, hey, he played here forever. And we got to attach that. And it's when you think about having nieces, nephews, kids, whatever, you can say, I watched him play, or that. It's just I get that a little bit better now.
I think since the turn of the century, the longest tenured A is Marcus Semien.
That's scary.
Do you think they're going to extend Chapman or Olsen to a long-term deal? Do you think
Absolutely
they'll you don't think they'll break pattern for even Chapman or Olsen?
No. They broke pattern for Chris Davis by giving him a 2-year deal.
And then he dipped below 247.
Hey, he's coming back. Chris Davis Resurgent Tour 2021. Hop on the bandwagon now before it leaves the station.
Oh, God. Callie, as mad as I am at you for not letting me go on my innovation rant, you made a very good point. I'm glad you made that point. Because if I'm being frank, that was the most blown up article I'd seen on their website in a very long time. But it was very much against the mold. And I don't know, just something still doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it's the innovation piece. Maybe it's a Cubs fan trying to tell me all about how Rays fans aren't going to get attached.
If there's anything to criticize the Rays for, it's ownership not being willing to pay the players what they're worth.
Sure.
And that's a problem throughout baseball.
I also had an interesting thought when I first saw the article, is that you can make the argument that the Rays do have a couple of big players in Glasnow and Snell that you can get attached to, especially Snell. But like I think a lot of people when they think like big names, they're usually thinking bats, unless the pitcher's been there for like 7+ years already.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Snell's still young, so
But like, what's their longest
player?
contract right now? Kiermer, he's signed for what 3 more years?
Yeah.
I think Kiermaier is the longest tenured player, but I'm not positive. I don't know his contract though.
I think the
Snell-
innovation. Go ahead.
Snell, I think did he just sign an extension or is he about
He
to hit
did.
arbitration? He signed an
I
extension.
remember hearing about him signing an extension.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
That's a good point, though. I don't know. I see where some people make the argument that analytics take some of the, and it does naturally take some of the more human elements out of the game, and the human elements here being just an attachment to players. I will still be above innovation above all. I will still be about innovation above all else. However, it's an interesting point to make. And Callie, I'm glad you brought it up.
I also just hate the whole general the whole either swing for a homer or strikeout. I miss like even watching the Mets lose to the Royals. I love stolen bases. I love bunting. I know I'm weird. I know I'm ostracized in the baseball community now. But that's just the game I love. So I also just got annoyed with the article for that reason.
That's fair.
I
don't
also
like
think
bunting,
it's because visually good plays in baseball hitting wise aren't as impressive as good plays.
Yeah.
A 50-yard pass in football is always going to be impressive, but battling back from being down 0-2 to draw a walk isn't going to be very impressive
Exactly.
to the average person.
Yeah.
I think the second drafted article I ever started for Diamond Digest was about how we need to bring back bunting, and I just never finished it.
I don't think that would get much attention on the site.
It's going to get a lot of attention.
This was back a year and a half ago when I first started. It was literally I started it after I wrote 2 articles and then I started this draft and never completed it.
Might be a time to revisit.
Do you want
these to your mentions? No, it's going to be your problem. It's not going to be mine.
Is this how you want to gain clout for Diamond Digest?
Yes.
I had that. We're not going to talk about the one time I messed up really badly and actually had that happen.
Oh, God. Anywho, before Jonah gets himself in trouble, question 6. Kelly is taking the lead. The Rays have to be rooting for someone tonight, obviously. I would be crazy to think they wouldn't be. Who do the Rays match up better against? Is there any chance they'd want to see the Dodgers rather than the Braves? To give you an update, we're still tied at 3, bottom 7. Kelly, we'll start with you.
I think they would want to see the Braves more simply because the Braves do not have the depth pitching-wise that the Dodgers do. Outside of Fried, Anderson, and I'm forgetting somebody else. Starting pitcher.
Right?
Yeah. No, yeah, right. They don't have very many pitchers. Their bullpen's pretty good with Green, Melancon, Martin, and their offense was the best in baseball this year. But I think the Rays are set up to feast on a team that's lacking in depth. I think the Rays are better set up for the long game than the Braves are, and I think that's going to give them the advantage. But if it goes to, just the 4 game series, I still think it's the Braves because their bullpen and pitching ceiling isn't as high as the Dodgers ceiling.
Makes sense. Jonah?
I'm going to go against the grade. I actually think that they would prefer the Dodgers.
All right, let's go.
A couple of reasons. One is just more I think the Braves, even with the way the series has gone, the way they played coming into the playoffs, the way they played at the beginning of the playoffs, they're just the hotter team. And as we know, in one series, anything can happen and momentum is everything. But 2, I think that the Braves look a lot more fresh. Their offense, I think, is just good as the Dodgers, at least 1 through 6. You can argue about depth, but your number 7 hitter is Riley, your number 8 is Markakis. Those are still pretty good hitters. And Swanson's bat is coming alive. But their bullpen looks a lot fresher than the Dodgers right now. And I think that will play a key issue. And the Dodgers, especially if Kershaw's hurt, I'd rather face the Dodgers. If he's still struggling with the back spasms, because then you're facing one Buehler who's been struggling and May who's still rookie and hasn't proven that he can pitch in the playoffs.
He didn't even get. No, he did get out of the first thing, but he gave up a run first.
Yeah.
Ethan?
I mean, if you look at it on paper, one team hits Travis d'Arnaud cleanup and another team hits Cody Bellinger sixth. So I would rather face the team that hits d'Arnaud in the middle of their order. But yeah, I think the Rays match up better against the Braves. I think the Dodgers, like what they said, they have more flexibility with their lineup and with their pitching staff. They have better options to start games outside of the top of their rotation than the Braves do. So I think that just for like a matchup in a playoff series, I think they would rather play the Braves.
Ethan's learning how to play this game. You get the point.
Hey, the Rays I want to see the Dodgers just say hi to old buddy Andrew Friedman.
Oh yeah, that's a fun one though. The guy who had such a big part in
their last World Series run, and now they're going up against him. That would be quite the storyline.
That is quite the storyline. I don't know. Rays Braves is more fun from the standpoint of, two teams that you're not used to seeing there. Rays Dodgers is more fun from Callie standpoint. You were just saying this is two teams that Andrew Friedman built. So
I hate both options, if we're being clear about this.
I'm aware of your dislike for most of these options here.
Considering I grew up a Mets fan, and just I'm tired of watching the Dodgers in the playoffs.
I could have guessed your general disgust with it. So
that's how it was being a Pirates fan with the entire rest of the division being in the playoffs.
Hey, but you got the number one overall pick.
Yeah, but you get Rocker out of it.
Hopefully.
You mean Jack Leiter?
That's going to be a fun debate we're going to have at some point. That'll be a very fun debate, I bet. But
that can be an entire podcast episode.
Yeah, I was going to say. But that's saved for a better day. We'll wrap it up here. Callie, Ethan, you're going to remain tied until.
I need to win this one.
Well, if you can somehow, you're going to have to force a tie retroactively.
Right.
Because we are predicting the World Series champion. So, yeah, sorry, Jonah. So it's either going to be Callie or Ethan, unless Jonah, you make the only correct prediction here. Then it's a 3-way tie. However, we'll find out in a week. Predict the World Series champion if either the Braves or Dodgers win. So predict it if it's Rays Braves. Predict it if it's Rays Dodgers. Jonah, we'll let you get out in front of it and see if you can help yourself down the line.
Are we playing psychology game? Like, the only way I can actually win this game is if I pick the Braves right now. But I don't think they're going to win it all.
Jonah needs to go last to know what teams we don't pick.
No, it's fine.
That's a good point. Callie, you can go first.
I'll take the Braves just because I already know they're not taking the Braves. Like,
all right,
the Rays will win it all, but I'll take the Braves. So I can get the point.
So you're telling me if the Braves make it, the Braves are going to win.
Yes, let's go with that.
And if the Dodgers make it, the Rays are going to win.
The Braves will still win. In that case, the Braves will win in my heart.
I have a feeling you're not going to get the point.
The entire Dodgers team gets a bad COVID, and the Braves have to take their place.
Exactly.
The Dodgers took the lead in the 7th. Somebody just scored.
Cody. He just talked about him hitting 6.
Did something?
I'm a couple pitches behind. Give me a minute.
Oh, ESPN's behind. I don't actually have the game up, but
Ethan.
Ooh, that's a deep shot.
All right, let me get to it, and then we'll resume. Give me a moment here. You better get your thinking cap on, Ethan, because I'm coming.
I'm ready.
After this. All right.
Me too.
2-2, 2 outs. Man. Oh, it's still going. All right. I'm a couple pitches behind. All right. Braves make it. Who you got? Dodgers make it. Who you got?
I got the Rays winning no matter the situation, no matter the opponent.
Interesting. And Ethan?
I promise you I'm not making this up. I have my notes in front of me and I picked the Braves.
So you're picking the Braves?
I have it starting off with the legend of Ian Anderson, which didn't exactly pan out. But I'm still taking the Braves anyway. I think the Braves are going to come back. They're going to win this game, and they are going to win the World Series in 7. I said at the beginning of the championship series that whoever won the NLCS would win the World Series. So I'm going to stick with that.
Do I get bonus
All right.
points for predicting how the World Series ends? I'm
How
telling
does
you,
the World
we're going to
Series
get a
end?
flashback to 2017. Charlie Morton's going to be on the mound for out number 27.
So you know what? If that happens, I'll have to actually find you some actual reward for just winning or at least tying. Ethan, you held your own today. Even Jonah, you held your own today. This was a little bit closer, but we'll have to see. But currently, an impressive bat flip and a walk down the line for Bellinger as he hits a moonshot.
Hey, lads,
the
if
Dodgers
the
lead.
World Series does end with Morton on the mound, why don't you just buy me some A's 2020 American League Wild Card Champion shirt?
Not in your wildest dreams.
I-
You know
I-
what? Callie loses a point. Congratulations, Ethan.
Wait, while we're on the topic of Bellinger, does anyone else feel like his swing went back to his rookie season?
He looks better
The
this
swing
year.
back, huh?
He looks a lot better this year, if that's what you mean.
Oh no, I mean like last year was his MVP year, but his swing looked like he added a bit too much launch angle a bit this year.
Oh,
Like,
I actually
was-
preferred his swing this year.
Oh, you really preferred it
Yeah.
this year?
That's
I
just my
remember-
thought, but
I just remember seeing him come into the league and being like, this swing isn't sustainable, and then he dropped the launch angle by like 2 degrees, and it became like one of the most sustainable swings in the game.
interesting.
But when he was struggling early, at least at the beginning of the season, I haven't watched a lot of Dodgers this year. Like I've watched maybe 2 Dodgers games this entire season. At least at the beginning of the season, it looked like his swing was back to like it was a bit higher of a launch angle.
I'd have to give
All
that a
right.
deeper look.
I've never liked
Callie's
that.
ready to
Post
move
that
on.
instead of your bunting article.
Yes, maybe. Maybe. I've never liked Bellinger. I have no shame in saying
I was
that.
going to say not shocked. All right. Let's move on. Let's get to the storylines. Not much here, clearly, as we're down to 3 teams, and in an hour it'll be 2 teams. But Ethan, as the winner of 7th inning stretch, we'll start with you and your storyline.
All right, so I'm talking about the makeshift pitching staff that the Rays have assembled. We talked about the Rays a lot already and how they do things kind of counterintuitive to the rest of the league. I have compiled here a list of pitchers who were on the Rays ALCS playoff roster. John Curtis, Pete Fairbanks, Josh Fleming, Aaron Loop, Aaron Slagers, Ryan Thompson. Nobody knows who any of those people are.
Hey, I know who Pete Fairbanks is.
Nobody, very few people
Very few
outside
people.
of this group knows who any of those people are. John Curtis got cut by the Phillies last year. Pete Fairbanks was traded for Nick Solak. He had an ERA over 9 with the Rangers when they traded for him. Josh Fleming was a 5th-round pick who made his debut in August. Aaron Loop actually was successful for a while with the Blue Jays, but then got hurt last year and was not good the year before that. Aaron Slagers had his contract purchased from the Pirates in spring training in 2019. And Ryan Thompson was a Rule 5 pick. That group of pitchers pitched 32 2/3 innings in the playoffs against the Twins, Yankees, and Astros, who are really good offenses, and combined for a 3.58 ERA in the playoffs. So it's just absurd how the Rays can just pull these pitchers out of nowhere and get effective innings out of them. And Pete Fairbanks in the regular season recorded 0 saves. And he has a save in each playoff series so far, including the ALCS Game 7. He was on the mound when they clinched the pennant. So it blows my mind how the Rays continue to pull this off.
Stay tuned for our newest segment, Diamond Digest writer or Rays bullpen pitcher. because
That'd be a good
I
segment.
guarantee you will probably get one of those wrong. Some of those names they ran out there, I think I tweeted this. I'm like, I'm convinced I could become an eighth inning high leverage reliever at this point.
My favorite Twitter post was like your Rays reliever name is like your uncle's name and the northernmost city you visited.
It's impressive what they do, though. Seriously,
Yeah.
like it is impressive that they can find these guys and turn them into what they are.
We should
Brian
run down as a
Schlosser
Twitter
does
poll,
sound
though.
like a reliever name.
And I think the fun of it too is, these are guys who would never typically get shots, and you get you get into the Rays organization, like you feel like you got a shot somehow,
well, it's not
some
like
way.
These people have no talent. Peter Fairbanks throws 100.
Sure, but I mean more so guys that you feel like another organization probably would have given up on them sooner, or might not have been able to make them achieve the potential they had.
It's like that SpongeBob
Nick
meme.
Anderson.
Want to
What?
see me turn a nobody into an amazing reliever? Want to see me do it again?
Right.
Mhm.
Exactly. And what's fascinating about them is they continue to do that. All right, Jonah, what's your storyline?
My storyline is on the one consistent reliever that everyone knew going into this year, Nick Anderson, who, if we're on that topic of turning relievers into good pitch, I mean, Anderson was okay on the Marlins, but he never really shined, and now he's shining on the Rays. But he's been struggling in these playoffs. In 39 career appearances prior to this postseason with the Rays, he had given up a combined 6 runs, which includes 23 outings last year, and he only gave up 1 earned run this entire season. He's given up 6 earned runs in these playoffs. He's only appeared, I think it's like 7 games in the playoffs. Here, I have it. I made sure to have it. Yeah, 7 games in the playoffs. And he's given up as many earned runs as he did in his previous 39 appearances for the Rays. And the truth is that he's not striking out batters, and he's walking a full batter more per inning, which has raised his FIP, his xFIP. I think he'll be fine. I don't know what necessarily is causing it. It was a bit hard to find pitch usage for the playoffs. I was looking for that earlier, but I think we'll see about. I'm actually going to make a bold prediction where Anderson's going to pitch 4 scoreless innings in the World Series.
I think it was just because he was getting ran out there night after night.
Yeah,
That also could be a part of it.
it might just come down to fatigue, but certainly something to watch.
Yeah, well, if he was only like in the regular season, he struck out 4 batters per 9 innings, and in the World Series, he's only striking out 4.
Yeah.
So
Something to look at. Callie?
Yeah.
So I forgot to think of a storyline this week. So I've been scrambling to think of one, and I think I've come up with a satisfactory one. Nothing epitomizes the Dodgers' depth more than how they've used Julio Urias and Dustin May this postseason. Both have started games, and both have also come out of the bullpen. I've talked about how much I love pitchers who can do both many a time, and I think that flexibility is going to be incredibly helpful for them come the World Series. If, say, Kershaw has back spasms like we talked about, or just some other relievers are underperforming.
So, Callie, when I asked you before this, were you ready for the podcast? And you said, yes, I am.
I didn't know we were doing storylines this week since there's so little things to talk about.
It is a good point. And we do cover a lot with the 7th inning stretch, but certainly the Rays bullpen is something that is fun to highlight. And we might even get a new segment out of it, as we discussed before. But let's close the storybook. Turn on the TV, talk about what we're watching for this week with the World Series. Obviously, we still don't know if it's going to be the Dodgers or the Braves. However, there's plenty of storylines available, whether it's the Dodgers or the Braves, and certainly with the Rays already in, I'm sure there's something interesting you all have found. Callie, I'll give you time to find yours.
Well, I already know what I'm going to be watching for.
Well, what are you going to be watching for? Let's start with you then.
Looking for former A Joey Wendell to do great.
There it is. All right. Easy enough. Ethan, what you watching for?
I was really scared that somebody was going to steal my thunder here because we have made very little talk about Randy Arozarena on
This
this
is true.
podcast so far.
This is true.
I don't know how.
I'm going to start with my rebuttal to the point that I'm about to make, which is that there are more playoff games played now than there ever have been. So that kind of diminishes like breaking records in the
I know
play.
where you're going with this.
But the record for home runs in a postseason is 8. And Randy Arozarena is currently at 7, which matches his regular season total from this year. So I'm going to see if he can either tie or break the record. And I'm going to predict that he gets to double digits.
Oh my god.
Wow.
That would be quite the playoff appearance for Randy Arozarena.
I mean, I thought where you were going with, because there are more games, I think he has the highest slugging percentage in a postseason, or like he's up there.
Very possible.
So number of games wouldn't matter for that.
But certainly for home runs and even hits too, I knew he was getting up there too.
I think he broke former Ray Evan Longoria's record for.
Mm-hmm.
He had the rookie record.
Yeah.
And finally, Jonah, what you
I
watching
am
for?
going to watch the NL Shortstops, whichever team wins. I'm going to make a second bold prediction. I think either Seager or Swanson will win MVP. It's a bit easier to see with Seager. He's outside of Arozarena, or even you can argue Arozarena. He had 5 homers in the NLCS. Seager might be the hottest hitter right now, and he's been the Dodgers' best. Might have been the Dodgers' best hitter all year, and he constantly hits the ball hard. I think if the Dodgers win, he'll probably win MVP. Swanson is starting to hit. He hit his 3rd home run of the playoffs earlier in this game. I also just think it's a great narrative because a lot of people were ready to give up on him after like the first couple of seasons where he was massively underperforming.
Yeah.
Like everyone thought he was going to be one of the greatest shortstops of all time out of college, and he was massively underperforming. But he set career highs.
The Mark Apple of position players.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He set career highs in almost every single category this year, and that was in a 60 games, like in average and stuff. He tied his career high WAR in 60 games in a season he played 150 games. So he's had his breakout year this year. So I also think for the Braves to finally win another World Series, for all this narrative of him being a bust, it would be really cool if he's the reason why they win it. But I also think he played well, and he actually can, especially if they move him up from 6th to like 5th.
Yeah. He homered in tonight's game too, so certainly an argument there. I see Callie getting tired over there, so that must mean we are at the end of the podcast. But indeed we are at the end here. That is going to do it for us. And one more coming up next week. This will be our final episode next week with the World Series coming to a close by the time we actually it might not even come to a close by the time we record next. But I will record after the World Series ends. So we won't try and squeeze it in. But our last episode will obviously cover the World Series. And for this week with the World Series, make sure to be following us at Diamond_Digest on Twitter. Make sure to be following us on our website, diamond-digest.com. We got some articles coming out this week in between the NLCS and the World Series, as well as I'm sure plenty of postseason and World Series analysis as well. And finally, if you haven't been watching those hot mic streams we put out, please do so. I think they're an awesome opportunity for you guys to hear some of our other writers and other analysts who aren't on these podcasts every week.
Man, last night I did one with fellow writer Scott Bentley, and it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, they're a ton of fun. They're an alternative if you are not a Joe Buck fan. You're not having to hear about Joe Buck for.
Hey, Joe Davis is doing this.
He wasn't calling tonight.
Yeah, he wasn't calling tonight's game. However, he'll probably be
still
there for the
should
World
watch
Series. And you still should watch us because, like I said, our guys do a great job and certainly plenty of fun content with the hot mic stream. So make sure to be looking for those links when we tweet them out. They will provide a fun alternative, like I said, to your national broadcasts. But that's going to do it for us, folks. For the always wonderful Callie Tsai, who has returned and is getting more tired by the moment, as well as Ethan Fisher and Jonah Keehn. This is Jordan Lazowski saying take care, everyone. Enjoy your week. Enjoy the World Series. And we'll talk to you once it all comes to a close. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.
All right, bye.